Hey folks, Rob Daniels here from the movie, TV, and video game soundtrack program Visions in Sound. It can be found every Saturday morning, 12 to 2 a.m. on Mix 98.5 and in Kitchener, Waterloo, Canada. I always want to make sure that that's aware of so that it's not, people are not coming into this and going, oh, where is this guy located? Well, I'm in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. So, and you can also, if you've missed the show, which does happen, you can also find it on my website, visionsinsound.ca. Well, here we are, week 45. Yeah, we're moving quite along to week 52, and like I said, we're getting there. We're definitely getting there, and I'm you know what? I think I've said this before. I'm really liking this, so I'm thinking maybe moving beyond the 52 weeks. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. So this week we've got an interesting film in the fact that it got a release in Europe, but only got a video-only release in North America. And that's the 1999 film Resurrection. This is a strange film in its tone and its setup. This is essentially a serial killer thriller film very much in the vein of Seven, but set in an Easter setting. There's a specific mention of Easter, and the reason why I'm doing this week is not because it's Palm Sunday and not because it's because of that, but it's one of those films that doesn't get talked about very much, at least in my circle of influence. I don't hear very many people talk about this film. It very much has a lot owing to Seven, which came out a few years earlier. It's set in Chicago, but very clearly has Canadian locations. You can tell, Union Station being a perfect example of this. It's, like I said, a very interesting film, and one of the things about it is the composer who's attached to it. Now, this is a Russell Mulcahy film, by the way. I just wanted to make sure of this. This guy did The Shadow, Highlander, and many, many, many other things. So, you talk about you would be talking about, well, Shadow. The Shadow, for example, had Jerry Goldsmith attached, whereas you had attached to Highlander, Michael Kamen. This film has a very interesting composer attached to it, the name of James McGrath. Now, if you haven't heard of James McGrath, or if you haven't even heard of this film, it's not surprising. And this is going to be interesting in another facet, in the fact that I am presenting this to you without a release, without an official release of the soundtrack. I was fortunate enough to interview James McGrath very early on when I was doing my show, and I'll play a little bit of the interview that I did with him as with Jim, in the fact that he talks about how he became involved with Resurrection.
How did you first become associated with the film Resurrection?
Well, as I say, the director the picture editor, Gord McClellan, I had worked with on Fast Track, and he, for one reason or another, just thinks I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I love Gord, and he's just a wonderful guy. He originally, he actually has won an Academy Award for a documentary he edited a while ago, and he's done everything from The Relic Hunter to Road to Avonlea to right now he was working on a Warner Brothers series called Witchblade. So in any case, he loves music, and he just told Russell, the director, that he had the guy for him. And it wasn't even because I was Canadian. It wasn't a Canadian film. It was more just right place at the right time.
So how involved do others, such as the director, get involved in your project?
It varies a great deal. For example, Russell on Resurrection, because he spent most of his time in Los Angeles and Montreal, he was also directing episodes of The Hunger at that time. I had I didn't have a great deal of contact with him. I would send down half-inch videotapes with my music striped onto them with the picture, and we would talk on the phone. And most of the time, he said, "That's great, except for the theme." I must have written the theme like 10 times. He just kept on going. It needs to be, he's haunted by the death of his 4-year-old son. Just the way he said it, he had this vision that he wanted, and God love him, he was right. That the one I came up with finally was indeed the right one.
So when composing a score like Resurrection, what kind of a timeline are you given?
Well, the industry standard for scoring a picture is 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, they say. And with Resurrection, because, to tell you the truth, there was a great deal of controversy over the cut. It was very violent, and the producers wanted it one way, and Russell wanted another way, and it was things that are certainly beyond my control. The final cut was delayed for such a long time. It actually, I had a good 6 or 8 weeks to work on it. I had a very comfortable amount of time. It's just that it was very, I had to avoid certain scenes because they were still in a state of flux right up until the bitter end. As a matter of fact, even after I had scored it with a 50-piece orchestra, I had to go back in and re-edit it because they changed the picture.
So yeah, this is the interview that I did, or part of the interview that I did with James. Now, in this case, like I said, the score was not officially released, but I have a demo copy of it, a 24-minute demo copy of it. Now, there was one other release, or one other track, and it was released on this particular CD. And again, if you're not familiar with this CD, it's the Great Canadian Film and Television Cues. This was released in and around 1999-2000. So this has tracks from various Canadian composers, including a track from Resurrection by James McGrath. So that's kind of really the only official release for one of the cues or one of the tracks on the soundtrack. Now, personally, I think that this would stand up against many of the other soundtracks or scores of the day. It would just need a kind of a revisited, and I personally would like to see it get a release because it is really good. Here's the opening title. Whereas, where James mentions that Russell Mulcahy would say to him, "Yes, James Prudhomme is haunted by the death of his son." Have a listen. So look who's joined me. It's Gimli. He is the show cat. Been with me 18 of the almost 25 years of Visions in Sound. And this is, and getting back to Resurrection. Resurrection, again, like I said, it's one of those. I know what you're telling me. Resurrection is one of those films that you would kind of see out in the wild. It's again one of those films that would you go out and seek it? Yes, I know. I'm telling them about Resurrection. I'll get to you in a bit. I know you're probably hungry with food or something like that. I don't know. In any case, Resurrection is one of those films that you don't, that again has that Seven feel to it, but is definitely a different. And again, it has a really good cast in it. Christopher Lambert is in the film, but Leland Orser is in the film as his partner, and it is Leland really puts in a good performance here. Now, interestingly enough, he was also in Seven, but I won't get into Seven. Seven is kind of a disturbing film, as this is as well. So, Resurrection. Have a listen to a couple of the other cues. This is the Toronto. Yes, I know. This is the Toronto Symphony Orchestra that performs this on this as well. So have a listen. So yeah, Resurrection from 1999. Definitely a more definitely a more controversial film to be playing, the week before Easter. But in this case, it is, again, this very interesting portrayal of filmmaking in the late 90s, early 2000s, in the fact that, especially in Canada, because at this time there was still that they were trying to make cities in Canada look like cities in America, and that's a perfect example here. Whereas they try to substitute Toronto for Chicago. So it does work, because they do actually shoot some stuff in Chicago as well. So there's all of that. For me, this is one of those films that I watch on occasion, and I will say this: if you get a chance, see if you can find it, because it is actually worth a watch. Is it a great film? Exactly. No. Is it a good film? A time waster, as my friend Susan used to say? Yeah. It's a time waster. And one of those films that actually, it's good. Like I said, it's a good film, and you will get some enjoyment out of it. So with all that in mind, if you're interested in any of the film, television, or video game music that I do play on my show, you can catch me every Saturday morning on Mix 98.5, 12 to 2 a.m. Eastern Time. I can also be found on my website, visionsinsound.ca. I am on Blue Sky these days at visionsinsound.bsky.social. And I can also be found on GoodPods, a downloadable app for your phone or other type devices. And I can also be found on many of the other podcatchers out there, including the likes of Apple Music. Hey folks, we're getting into the Easter season, but I also want to take a moment and say this. If you're having trouble, and with the way the world is going right now, there are some pretty screwed up times right going on here. So if you're having trouble, by all means, it's always nice to have a cat. It's always nice, right, Gimli? It's nice to have a cat. But no, if you're having trouble, please call 911 for immediate help. You can also dial or text 988 for the suicide helpline. And there's also 1-844-HERE247 or HERE247.ca. They all offer ways for help if you or someone you know is suffering from mental health issues. So with that in mind, Gimli, what do we usually say? Oh, you're not talkative now. Like, share, and subscribe. And get out there and listen to some fantastic scores, some fascinating scores. And believe me, there are stuff out there that is definitely worthy of your time. If you can find any of the films. Unfortunately, James I don't think any of his scores have been officially released, which is too bad, because he definitely deserves it. But if you do get a chance to watch any of the movies, 2 movies that I recommend: Treat Murray and Resurrection. Two films that feature James's scores that I think you should check out. In that case, have yourself a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Good evening. As it has been, our top story tonight continues to be the ongoing search for a serial killer.
Guy comes in here, cuts another guy's head off, walks off with it, and nobody sees anything, no witnesses?
Lab says it wasn't human. It says it was lamb's blood.
A detective is about to test his faith.
All the victims were 33 years old, the same age as Christ when he died. The guy's rebuilding the body of Christ.
And his sanity. Resurrection. Christopher Lambert. Leland Orser. Question your sanity. And have mercy on your soul. Because Judgment Day has arrived.
No!
From the director of Highlander and The Shadow comes a horrifying story about two cops who must find a madman before it's too late. Be afraid, for he has risen. Resurrection.